Welcome back to the Secrets of Superpowers, the channel where we uncover the hidden mechanisms, forbidden technologies, and shadow operations that shape the modern world. And today, you will hear a story that will force you to look at the space race in a completely new way. At the moon, at the rockets, at the satellites, at the entire Cold War. Because, perhaps, that brilliant launch that propelled humanity toward the stars was born in the darkness.in, the bunkers.in, the laboratories of the Third Reich. This is Cosmic Race, the Nazi starting line. In school, we were told that the space race was a rivalry between the US and the USSR. A competition between two superpowers, whose rocket would fly higher, faster, farther, who would put the first human in space, who would step on the moon first. But there is a detail that is usually omitted from textbooks, a detail without which this whole history seems incomplete. Because both the US and the USSR did not start from scratch, and the first frontier of the space race was not in Washington or Moscow. It was in Peenemünde, on a secret base of the Third Reich. This is where the V-2 rockets were born, the world's first ballistic missiles, the first machines capable of reaching space. This is where the engineers worked, whose formulas launched the rocket programs of two superpowers. And after the war, these people, these blueprints, these technologies did not disappear. They were taken, divided, used. And that is precisely how the space race we know today was born. Peenemünde is a small island in the Baltic Sea today. It's a museum. Then, it was the heart of the Third Reich's most secret program. This is where Wernher Von Braun worked, the man who would become the father of the American space program. This is where the V-2 was engineered, the first rocket to cross the boundary of space. In 1944, the V-2 reached an altitude of over 80 kilometers. In tests, it ascended even higher, to the cosmic limit. It was not a weapon of the future. It was the future that accidentally became a weapon. Hitler wanted a missile to destroy cities. The engineers wanted a vessel to fly to the stars. And it was exactly these blueprints, these engines, these formulas, that would, a few years later, lift the first American and Soviet rockets into the sky. But this brilliant engineering had an inhumane price, a price Wernher von Braun never liked to mention. The V-2 rockets were not built in modern laboratories. They were assembled in the underground complex Mittelwerk, which housed one of the Reich's most horrific concentration camps, Dora. Over 20,000 prisoners died during this cosmic construction from exhaustion and accidents. The fact that the space age began with mass murder, and its chief architect was a direct participant in this forced labor system, created a deep moral fissure in the entire history of the Cold War. When Germany capitulated, the Allies weren't just entering ruined cities. They were hunting for people, for brains, for knowledge. Dozens of intelligence groups raced toward Peenemünde and Mittelwerk, Americans, British, Soviet troops. Everyone was after the same thing. After those who knew how to build a rocket capable of reaching space. And this is where a struggle began. That had nothing to do with morality. The main thing was different: to get there first. Because whoever took this knowledge would obtain the future. That is why the USSR did not merely take scientists. They conducted a counter-operation to Paperclip, known as Project Orion. It was not recruitment. but the compulsory trophy evacuation of entire families of engineers, providing them with comfort, but complete isolation under the supervision of the KGB. Sergei Korolev, the father of the Soviet space program, who himself survived the Gulag, was forced to work side by side with those who had previously created weapons for his enemies. This dual morality, this forced union of adversaries, became the trademark of the space race's beginning. The US acted quickly. They carried out a secret operation, Operation Paperclip. Its goal was to bring all German rocket specialists to America officially for scientific work. Unofficially, to prevent the USSR from getting them. Von Braun and over 1,600 scientists received new documents, new names, a new history. But this was not just a logistical operation. It was a direct moral compromise, sanctioned at the highest level. The CIA and the US State Department knowingly falsified the medical and political dossiers of the scientists to hide their involvement with the SS and the use of forced labor. Von Braun, like dozens of others, was issued a new, clean biography. Skeptics at the time asked, how can we build a democratic future world on the foundation of war criminals? But the government's answer was simple: science is more important than morality. Thus, the entire US space program was founded on a political maneuver and a hidden lie, and they were given a task: build rockets for the US that will change the world. Thus were born the first American ballistic missiles, the Redstone rocket, the Jupiter rocket, the Saturn V rocket, the one that took humans to the moon. All of this is the direct legacy of German technologies. The space race was never just about science. It was about total military dominance. And thanks to the German engineers, Americans began developing projects that seem fantastical today, or rather, simply insane. One of the most shocking secret plans, Project Orion. Its goal was to create a spacecraft that would move using a series of directed nuclear explosions as fuel. That's right, nuclear bombs as propulsion. This spacecraft, capable of transporting nuclear weapons across the entire solar system, was designed by engineers relying on experience with explosives gained back in the Third Reich. Another terrifying example was Project A119, a secret USAF plan to drop an atomic bomb on the moon. The goal was not military, but purely psychological, to show the USSR absolute technological superiority. Although this plan, which could have led to unpredictable consequences, was ultimately blocked, the mere fact of its existence shows how high the stakes were, and how far governments were willing to go for cosmic domination. The USSR also did not stand aside. They found, evacuated, and forced hundreds of German engineers to work. Sometimes under guard, sometimes voluntarily, but the result was the same. It was these specialists who helped create the R1, a copy of the V2, then the R2, R5, and finally, the legendary R7, the rocket that launched the first satellite into orbit, Sputnik 1. And later, Yuri Gagarin. Without the German formulas, blueprints, and engines, these rockets would have appeared decades later. Or not at all, but, despite having German knowledge, the Soviet moon program failed. The reason lay not in technology, but in the human factor and internal struggle. chief designer Sergei Korolev and his rival Valentin Glushko constantly clashed. This lack of unity and personal animosity led to fatal mistakes in the design of the N-1 rocket. The N-1, which was supposed to deliver the USSR to the moon, exploded during every single one of its 4 launches. Thus, the US victory was not only technological, but also organizational. The USSR acquired the German knowledge but could not use it effectively due to internal strife. On October 4, 1957, the world froze. A steady, cold beep beep was heard from the sky. The USSR was the first to launch a satellite. Americans were in shock. Newspapers screamed "radios from space," a Soviet star over America. It was a psychological blow. The US realized they were losing a race they themselves had started. And this pushed them to create NASA, the same NASA that would later fly to the moon. After Sputnik, the stakes rose, resources, budgets, tens of thousands of people entered the game. And at the center of it all, Wernher Von Braun, the former V-2 designer now, the chief engineer of NASA. In 1969, the world witnessed a moment that would go down in history. A man on the moon and the US flag. But underneath that flag stood formulas that were written in Peenemünde, ideas born in the shadow of war. That is precisely why the shadow of Operation Paperclip still haunts NASA in the form of moon landing hoax myths. Conspiracy theorists argue, if the US government could lie about von Braun's past, falsifying his SS membership, then it could also lie about the landing to win the most critical psychological stage of the Cold War. Although the scientific evidence for the landing is undeniable, the fact that the American government previously concealed the crimes of its key scientists adds fuel to this conspiracy theory, making it one of the most popular in the world. Some of the documents from the German rocket programs are still classified today. Why? Many believe that these documents contain more than just technical formulas. There is a theory that the most exotic Wunderwaffe concepts, such as the flying wing, Horten Ho 229, and advanced guidance systems, were moved specifically to the US, to classified bases like the legendary Area 51. There, allegedly, based on German developments, the first stealth technologies and high-speed aircraft were tested. These German prototypes of intercontinental systems, developed back in the 1940s, likely remain in archives. Inaccessible to most historians, history still does not know everything that was created. In the Third Reich, the space race eventually became a cover behind the beautiful. Words about science lay something else. Orbital reconnaissance, spy satellites, early warning systems, rockets capable of carrying a nuclear payload across the ocean, all of this grew on the foundation laid by German engineers. From the V-2 to nuclear intercontinental missiles, this journey took less than 20 years, and here is the main question. Could the US and the USSR have even started the space race without German knowledge? Most historians give one answer: no. Both superpowers started from the same foundation. One voluntarily took the engineers. The other forced them to work. But the result was the same. The space race became possible only because dozens of German scientists continued their research. Today, when we look at modern rockets, footage from Mars, launches of Falcon, Starship, Ariane, it is difficult to imagine that their beginning lies in the dark dungeons of the Third Reich. The German engineers didn't just become part of history, they became the starting point, a start that defined the 20th century and continues to define the 21st. If you enjoy diving into the hidden history of superpowers, subscribe, hit the like button, and comment on which secret topic you want to hear next. The story gets even more intriguing from here.